Hey mamas, Happy New Year. Congratulations. You did it. You survived 2020. Personally, I am feeling a lot better. You can probably even hear it in my voice. I recorded the first episode at the end of 2020, and now I'm recording this intro at the beginning of 2021. So, real quick, I just wanted to talk a little bit about New Year's resolutions because that's what we do in the new year. For this year, it is my hope that all of you are finally choosing the passion and the purpose you were put on this earth to do. I hope you make the right resolution. WRITE resolution. I have made some of my own resolutions, my own writing resolutions this year that we will get into, but more importantly, it is time to get you writing. So, as I stated in the first episode, these next few episodes are going to be my Write Blueprint and the 7 days to series to get you outlined and writing in 7 days or less. If you want the cheat sheets that just lays out all the categories we're going to go through, you can sign up at my website at christineholloway.com. I'll put the links in the show notes. If you want to go ahead and get the whole kit, I will put that link in the show notes as well, but you don't need it. You just need the cheat sheets and the next several episodes of my podcast. Either way, I want to wish you all a very, very happy new year, happy 2021, and happy writing. Welcome back to the Claim Your Right podcast for the Mama Writer Wannabe, where we grant ourselves permission to put down perfection and pick up the pen. I believe that writers are born to write, even busy mamas whose daily commute is riding the Hot Mess Express. My belief is firmly rooted in the eternal truth written on every writer's soul, that the simple act of writing can be healing, transforming, and liberating. Simply by you sitting down and writing, I believe you can change yourself, your family, your community, and maybe even the world. I also believe that embracing your passion and living your life with purpose is one of the best examples you can give to your children. In this podcast, you will find writing hacks, tips and tricks, coaching and mentorship, goal setting and accountability, a space for the writer in you to flourish, and an opportunity to discover the freedom, both personal and financial, that is rightfully yours. Hi, my name is Christine Holloway, self-published author and writing coach. I help busy moms reclaim the writer within and unlock their true freedom so they can finally start living the writer lifestyle they have always imagined. Welcome, my fellow writers. Let's dive in. So, what is the Write Blueprint 7 Days to Series kit, besides something that probably needs a new name? Sidebar, I am horrible at titles. Titles are like my writer kryptonite. But I digress. So, the Write Blueprint is basically a series Bible where you can plot out your series, characters, locations, settings, everything that is fundamental to your series and then also your story. So the Write Blueprint has a section for your series and then a section for your book, and then you can do as many books as you want. The 7 Days to Series is a method where I take you through 7 days of quickly plotting it out so you can get on to writing as soon as possible. So just a couple things before we dive into the content of the Write Blueprint and the 7 Days to Series method. There's a couple things I wanted to mention. First of all is the time frame. If 7 days is too quick, don't beat up on yourself. You should not be comparing yourself to other writers. I do think accountability and goal setting is monumental in living the writer lifestyle that you've always dreamed. Because, like we talked about, writing, you have to write, you have to sit down and write and do the work. That said, if you haven't picked up a pen in 2 decades, or you just have a hint of a story, it's perfectly acceptable not to have everything plotted out in 7 days. And that's also a point I wanted to make, is that within the 7 days, you're going to put down the foundation of what you have in your head for your series and your stories. Be that the first one or the first three, however you feel you need to work on it. But you don't have to have everything filled out before you start writing, because as you go, especially for me, I find that as I write, the story sometimes reveals itself to me as I'm writing. So I have the foundation, and maybe it's like interior decorating. I have the foundation in my head and a little bit, the walls and the fixtures, but the story itself can sometimes create itself in the writing process, painting the walls, adding the curtains, etc., etc. You get the metaphor. So the takeaway is, don't compare yourself to other writers, but don't let yourself off the hook. Be honest with your goal setting. Don't set yourself up for failure, because that can be even worse. But set realistic goals for yourself and then hold yourself accountable. Make sure you're following through. And I wanted to touch on again about the idea of making the choice to write, of claiming your right, just like the podcast says. When I say this, I don't mean, well, I don't know where your priorities are, but I'm not advocating you quit your job tomorrow if you don't have a savings account. I don't recommend you make drastic measures. I certainly don't. I mean, I'm not saying ignore your children or your family obligations. I'm not saying, drop everything to write, because ultimately you want to live your writer lifestyle so you can have more time with your kids and your family, and you can do the things that make life enjoyable. But it does mean that you might have to make the tough choice of, am I going to binge Netflix until 1 a.m.? Or am I going to try and go to bed early so I can get up at 5 o'clock and do the writing that I need to do? And maybe 5 o'clock in the morning isn't your jam, and that's perfectly okay, because that's right where I'm at. I am a certified night owl, and it is very difficult for me to get up early and write, but I have learned what works for me in my life. I'm a single mom, like I mentioned, and so I have figured out a way to basically time block my writing. A lot of people, I've heard a lot of things over the past year about batching, and I don't know if it's going to work for everybody, but I do a lot of pre-writing in my head, and then when my son goes to my parents, or I'm ready to pull an all-nighter, and my son goes to bed, I sit down and write. I know that there are a lot of writing coaches that say writing, the idea that writing is a habit, and this absolutely works for a lot of people, and that is, yes, setting a set time in the day, every day, that you're going to sit down and write something. It doesn't matter what it is. You sit down and write, and writing becomes a habit. So there's different methods, and I'm sure we'll go into them, but I think a lot of it is just going to be you know yourself, you know how you write, so that's going to be a little process of self-discovery and making it work within your own family dynamics. But it's possible. It's just something you might have to spend a little time on. But again, that goes back to making that decision that you're going to make writing a priority, and you're going to claim your right. And the 7 days to series method was kind of set up for that. So you can play around with that. You have 7 days to do these tasks, to get this stuff done, each per day, so you can kind of play around with, okay, what time of day am I most productive? When? A lot of people say morning, obviously, because of several reasons, but I know a lot of people who can't write until dusk. But if you use the 7-day method, that I would highly recommend being in tune with when you're writing best and trying to fit in that writing time. Use the 7-day method to start playing around with and establishing that writing time for yourself. And then again, it does not have to be finished before you start writing. So this kind of segues into something I wanted to cover, and that is the plotter versus the pantser. Now, the plotter is the type of writer who plots out every aspect and every detail of their story or their series before they'll even start writing. The obvious negative downside to that is they use plotting and outlining to never actually start the writing process. On the flip side, a pantser, now I had never heard of this term before last year, which is ironic because I am a total pantser, or historically have been a total pantser. And that is where you sit down and write by the seat of your pants. And the obvious downside of pantsing is that you sit down to write and everything is chaos and you don't know where you left off and you can't remember, a minor character's name from chapter 3 or, the color of her hair from chapter 5. And so then you go back and waste a whole bunch of time looking for these details that impede your writing. The chaos impedes your writing. So over this past year, after I've discovered this great debate that I didn't even know was raging about plotter versus pantser, and you can Google it, there's quite a few writers who go into this. But I think I'm like most of them when I say neither is right. Both have their pros and cons. And the important thing is to find balance between the two. I discovered last year, and probably it was because of Scrivener. I have not mentioned Scrivener yet. Scrivener is amazing. I highly recommend everyone look into it. If you can, it is an excellent writing tool. I know there's other ones. Vellum, I don't have a Mac, so I have not used that. And there's definitely other writing tools. And I do know my friend who is going to, my statistician friend, she really enjoys using Word, but she's learned a whole bunch of features that Word has that I didn't realize. But regardless, last year I discovered Scrivener, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. I felt like I have been using a stone tablet and a chisel to write for the last 2 decades until I found Scrivener. So I'm sure we'll go into that in a later date, but I highly recommend it. But once I found Scrivener, I discovered how plotting could actually save me time and headache and help me finish a story. So I started plotting some things out. However, I also discovered that there's a reason I think I was a pantser, for good reason that I was a pantser for so long. I have a writing quirk. Basically, if I plot everything out, I'm not one of those writers that can write out all the good scenes and all the ones that are in my brain and then go back and fill it in. If I write the really good scenes, if I write the ending scene, my creative mind is done. My muse is like, okay, whatever, we know how it ends, let's move on. So I have to kind of walk a little balance between those two. And I'll tell you another downside about plotting that I learned last year. And this is about the book that I self-published in 2020 at the start of quarantine, that I said I dusted off an old book, the first half of an old book that I had put away. And that was because I had plotted everything out, and I got to a fork in the road, so to speak, in my story. And the story wanted to go one way. My plot, my outline, wanted to go a different way. And I really struggled with this. And then I was like, all right, well, I know how it ends. I've got it all in my head, and this is the way I'm going to go. So I went with the outline, and it was like pulling teeth. Rewriting like sentences and paragraphs just to try and get back into the flow. And so instead of, the light bulb going off in my head, I maybe, you need to go back and do the other one. I just got fed up and I closed it and I put it in a drawer. Well, it was on my laptop, but figuratively, I put it in a drawer and didn't dust it off for a year. I actually went on and wrote a different story, which we'll go into. I don't know if I should tell you the names of all these stories or if it'll just be confusing. So the big takeaway from that is balance is necessary. Plot out enough to have a solid foundation for your series or your story, but allow the story the flexibility it needs to be able to flow, to be able to make those changes, to be pleasantly surprised by the story that you're writing. Not only do I think it'll be an easier process for you, but I think it'll be more enjoyable. And I think it will be easier for you to get to the end of the first draft. And one final tip that I have learned is if you get to a fork in the road with your story and you want to make a change that requires you to go back and change aspects of chapters, of sections, of part of the book that you have already written, my adamant recommendation is that you do not go back and rewrite those sections. Make a note of the changes that you want to make and keep writing, keep going forward as if you've already made the changes. So in your mind, you've already made the changes. This will save you so much time. I have wasted countless, probably weeks, months of my life going back and rewriting things that I wanted to change. Part of this is because I was not a plotter and I didn't write things down. But in all honesty, it was a very good way for me to not finish. It was a very good excuse to not finish. And if you rewrite the beginning section of a story 11 times, there's a good chance that you're going to get sick of it and want to move on with something else without finishing the story. So that is just my little advice on making changes. So the next episode, we are going to start to go through the right blueprint. I'm going to talk you through it. You can sign up for the cheat sheet on my website, christineholloway.com, and that'll give you all the sections that you need to map everything out. And then it'll also have the 7 days to series method where it shows what day you can be doing what. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk soon.
Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review, please. Thanks.
Hey Mama, one last thing before you go. If you enjoyed this show, please share this with someone you might know who is also struggling to reclaim the writer within and might find value in the content. Because I am hoping everyone makes the right resolution this new year, I am offering discounted coaching sessions for the entire month of January. So if you need some help mapping out your story or organizing your thoughts, I am available. Whether you need a gentle hand or a drill sergeant, I am here for it. Find out more at christineholloway.com, where you can also find more resources. The link is in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and happy writing.